Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Secretary General, esteemed members of the Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is both an honor and a pleasure for me to address this Parliamentary Assembly. It is a privilege, as Malta's head of state, to be here to mark the 50th anniversary of Malta's accession to the Council of Europe. It is also a pleasure to be here because I recall the memorable moments in my long political career as one of Malta's delegates to the Parliamentary Assembly. The Parliamentary Assembly can be deemed as representing the main political movements in the member states of the Greater Europe. Thus, it is representative of the people of Europe. It is a gathering that functions as the symbol, as well as the mechanism whereby civil society may truly share in the dialogue taking place on the Council of Europe through locally elected representatives. Such wide-ranging regional representation helps bring to the fore a European reality that advocates human rights, respect for human dignity, upholding the rule of law and democracy, as well as the fundamental freedoms as the basic expression of its nature and reason of existence. Today, I am proud to share with you the sense of Europe as a reality that not only pertains to Europeans and our geographical region, but to all people of goodwill who firmly share the tenets of democracy and freedom vested in the all-embracing principle of human rights. Indeed, by adopting the European Convention on Human Rights in 1950, Europe not only was making a statement in line with its inherent social and moral values, but also reaching a highly sophisticated mechanism. A mechanism that represents a coherent level of adherence with what is most conducive to change, and which ultimately lead to the 1959 establishment of the European Court of Human Rights. Malta reaffirms its commitments to the principles and measures set forth in Interlaken, Izmir, Brighton, and most recently in Brussels. I would like now to take the opportunity to congratulate the outgoing Belgian presidency for successfully promoting the drafting and the adoption of the so-called Brussels Declaration during the high-level conference on the implementation of the European Convention on Human Rights, our shared responsibility, in March this year. While Malta welcomes the conclusions adopted at the end of the 125th session of the Commission of the Council of Europe on the state of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law in Europe, Malta is now looking forward to working with the chairmanship of Bosnia-Herzegovina during the next 6 months. In the current context, it is imperative that the human dimension remains central in our discussions and provide the required trust in conducting the business of the Council of Europe. Madam President, as I have already remarked in my introduction, I am here to share with you the commemoration of a momentous occasion for my country. Soon after gaining independence in 1964, Malta became the 18th full member of the Council of Europe. It was on the 29th April 1965 that Malta acceded to the Council of Europe. Malta ratified the European Convention on Human Rights on the 23rd January 1967 and recognized the right of individual petition on the 1st May 1987. That very same year, the Convention on Human Rights was incorporated into the Maltese Civil Code. As a result, the rich case law of the Strasbourg Court became part and parcel of our national human rights heritage. I am pleased to note that Malta participates fully and actively in all the various organs, committees, conferences, seminars, workshops and the programs of the Council of Europe. I will now dwell on some of my concerns, which I believe are also of concern to many of you. Malta fully supports all initiatives taken by the Council of Europe to strengthen its relations with the Mediterranean region and to assist the region in overcoming the significant challenges it is facing as it passes through an era of unparalleled changes, namely in the context of migration and issues related to radicalism and extremism, leading to unprecedented forms of terrorism. Migration is a global phenomenon that requires global solutions. The most recent tragedies at sea have made us realize the risks faced by migrants crossing the Mediterranean. They have also highlighted the challenges faced by countries like Malta in responding to these emergencies, being at the forefront of migratory pressures. Within the context of the European Union, Malta, along with other frontline member states, called for effective action by the European Union in order to prevent further loss of life at sea and to tackle the root causes of migration in cooperation with the countries of origin and transit. The decisions taken at the highest political level in the European Union on the 23rd April 2015, as well as the set of proposed actions proposed by the Commission, launched the European Agenda for Migration, which are timely and encouraging steps in the right direction. While the need to strengthen operations to save lives at sea is now being addressed more intensely, at the same time, we need to work further to address the root causes of migration, in closer cooperation with countries of origin and transit in the Mediterranean and in Africa. We need to work harder to bring about an effective, comprehensive, and holistic migration policy. Conversely, within the context of the Council of Europe, I note with appreciation that in examination of the Parliamentary Assembly Resolution 2059 of the year 2014, the Committee of Ministers has recognized the mounting pressures on certain Council of Europe member states, including Malta, to cope with the irregular flows of migrants in the Mediterranean Sea. Notably, the Committee of Ministers acknowledges too that methods of solidarity and responsibility sharing are the way forward out of this impasse. Malta believes that an international anti-human smuggling coalition mandated by the United Nations should be set up and given a mandate to intervene and to disrupt human traffickers who are making a profit from the plight of these poor people. Frankly speaking, I personally think that we, as international community, have been quite passive for much too long in the face of such criminal activity. Now, more than ever, passiveness should not be an option. However, we need to keep in mind that no single measure will provide a comprehensive solution to the problem of migration. I reiterate that we need to design a holistic action policy on migration, which is the only way to ensure that people may live decently and enjoy productive lives. It is said that advocating for migrants' rights is a risky business. I can attest to this, as I often come under attack because I advocate in favor of migrants' rights. After all, migrants' rights are human rights, as embedded in the Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, and a number of European Union regulations and frameworks that uphold human rights. We need to think about ways how these people in peril are protected and their human rights upheld. We need to think long-term so that future generations are spared these tragedies and the loss of life is transformed into respect for diversity and inclusion at all levels. Education is one asset we need to use as we facilitate education about the different cultures that exist beyond our borders. The more we know about each other's traditions, customs, culture, religions, and more, the more we can understand each other and live in harmony. Education can empower migrants. If education in specific skills is facilitated, migrants can become more empowered and employable. In consultation with migrants themselves, training can be provided in a variety of languages, professions, and skills that will ultimately translate into more control of their future. By becoming employed, pressure on the host states, financial assistance will be relieved. Migrants can become an asset to our economies. Hence, migrants will not be considered a burden sharing, but as an opportunity sharing that will impact positively on our depleting workforce in Europe and subsequently address our concerns regarding the sustainability of our welfare and pension systems. Our children today are already benefiting from having migrant schoolmates. They can understand, in perhaps the most innocent and honest ways, that their migrant companions are children like them. This instilled sense of inclusion needs to be highlighted and celebrated throughout the education systems so that future generations see diversity as an asset that adds value to the society we live in. States and international and regional organizations also need to fulfill their international legal obligations and do their part in tackling migration. Attention needs to be focused on the push factors that are ultimately driving people away from their homelands. Where there is instability, war, and conflict to the detriment of innocent people, states need to take concrete action and facilitate reconciliation and peace. Where the push factors are economic, the international community needs to do more so to facilitate trade and development. If the economic situation proves there will be more prosperity and therefore less incentive to leave. Assistance given needs to economically empower these countries so that their trade and their economies can develop and flourish for the benefit of their people and our peoples. In this context, the concept of South-South cooperation needs to be supported because it provides a viable path to balancing economic growth and equity that can ultimately promote prosperity for all. Encouraging this kind of cooperation will help move towards sustainable development that in time will eradicate extreme poverty, inequality, malnutrition, and an overall vulnerability that affects millions of migrants today. Migration may also be the result of climate change, with dwindling access to water, demolition of forests and rural areas, and rising sea levels. Migrants must be helped to migrate with dignity in such circumstances. Solutions must not only address the effects of migration or just provide hope. They need to be based on intelligent, cohesive policies that are comprehensive in nature and pinned on a human rights-based approach. The time has come when we should be looking at this evolving reality in terms of shared opportunities rather than shared burdens. Madam President, it is positive to note that the Council of Europe is further developing its policy towards our neighbouring countries, mainly those in North Africa, the Middle East and Central Asia. The fact that various instruments have been launched, such as the Neighbourhood Cooperation Instrument, is proof of added value to the existing relationship between the Council of Europe and these countries or regions. We hope that such cooperation will not only lead to these countries embracing the values upheld by the Council of Europe, but at the same time to ensure more stability and security, both within Europe as well as its neighbourhood and the world in general. Like the Council of Europe, the European Union also follows closely the social, economic and political development of its neighbourhood on its southern and eastern neighbours through the European Union neighbourhood policy and related programmes such as the European Endowment for Democracy. On another note, the recent spat of urban terrorist attacks in Paris, Copenhagen, Tunis and other cities elsewhere, and the haphazard killing of innocent people has once again highlighted the urgent need to seek and devise an adequate and rapid response to encounter fully or at best contain this alarming and human upsurge. Malta would like to express its gratitude to the outgoing Belgian presidency for its initiative to focus on the fight against terrorism in the Committee of Ministers meeting held in Brussels this May. Malta reiterates its solidarity with other Council of Europe members and our neighbours that have been deeply affected by these attacks. Malta welcomes the adoption of the additional protocol supplementing the Council of Europe Convention on the Prevention of Terrorism, as it complements other international efforts to prevent the recruitment and travelling of individuals that seek to travel to join a terrorist group. Unfortunately, Europe has witnessed a marked increase in nationals that have sought to travel to join terrorist groups in Iraq and Syria. And here I ask, why are young people born and bred in our democracies choosing to risk their lives rather than enjoying the benefits afforded by human rights? What has gone wrong? What has affected their choice in life? Who failed them? Was it our attitudes, prejudice, or policies? We need to ask. We need to analyze. We need to know. We need to address the scourge in the right way. Malta believes that we should seek to address this phenomenon, not only through legal instruments, but we should focus on empowering young people to build on their values and find their scope in life through positive action. Alternatively, we must also note the return of these radicalized fighters that may have potential disastrous effects on their home countries. I am pleased to note that the International Institute on Justice and the Rule of Law that was established last year in Malta is providing rule of law-based training to lawmakers, police, prosecutors, judges, correction officials, and other justice sector stakeholders on how to address terrorism and related transnational criminal activities within a rule of law framework. Given the geographic location, the Institute is paying particular attention to supporting countries in transition in Northwest and East Africa and the Middle East. Such institutes are crucial to provide the training and expertise to states that are working to develop their justice, security systems and institutions. Thus, such initiatives will help to contribute to the stability and could serve as a regional catalyst to counter terrorism, radicalization, and violent extremism. Malta remains convinced that effective counter-terrorism strategies and the promotion and protection of human rights are reinforced and linked intrinsically with development. Malta believes it is necessary to engage more with our partners in neighboring regions that are negatively affected by terrorist activity. Addressing security threats emanating from terrorist activity within our borders also requires strong cooperation with countries, particularly in North Africa and the Gulf. Malta has also been doing its part in taking steps to combat terrorism at both international and domestic level. Initiatives such as the Money Laundering Bill and the Additional Protocol to Combat Terrorism are few of the salient measures taken in this direction. Terrorism is not only evil and ruthless, but very often it is devious and cowardly. It can hit and strike anyone, anytime, and anywhere. The more innocent the victim, the greater is the terror. The greater the bloodshed, the more it delights in its misguided sense of glory. Our immediate concern, however, is to try and get to the root of the scourge to humanity and human values. Madam President, gender equality is a core value of European societies. Nobody in Europe should argue about that, but the time is ripe to shift emphasis from mere political rhetoric to tangible action. Sustainable progress on gender equality requires the equal participation of women and men in all spheres of public and private life. Progress has been noted in the recent past in areas such as tertiary education, but gender gaps remain in a number of vital areas. I can identify immediately at least 3 major systemic injustices about women that are easily identifiable, although there are others. These are female underrepresentation in political bodies and in leadership roles, discrimination in the labour market, including different pay scales to their disadvantage, and violations with respect to their bodily integrity. To begin with, there are still too few women in leadership positions, not least so in the political arena. On account of a variety of reasons, be they societal, domestic, traditional, and even at times religious, women do not seem to be represented enough in national parliaments. On an average, the imbalance can even be as high as 2 out of 3 in favor of men. Although things seem to be moving in the right direction, but the momentum remains rather slow. Today, women are appreciably present in the labour market. One direct consequence of this positive development is that women have become increasingly more independent financially. But there is no justifiable reason to feel comfortable about it. Women's employment rate in 2013 stood at 62.6%, against 74.3% for men in Europe. Across European Union countries, labour statistics show that women still earn an average pay which is a staggering 16% less than that of men for performing the same job. Equally odd is the fact that studies show that young women find it harder than men to enter the labour market.